Hello and welcome. This is part 6 of the Massachusetts versus Karen Reed Daubert hearing. Thank you for being here.
Just want to look. Sure, Henry. You all set? I'm all set. Thank you.
Again, I said it in the last video in part 5. Hank Brennan respects Robert Alessi. It's so clear to me. Now, before Hank Brennan begins, I want to forewarn you, if you haven't been following me long, you should know that I get triggered rather easily by the prosecution in the Karen Reed case. There is a blatantly obvious cover-up going on, and I've seen enough from Adam Lally to come to the conclusion that the prosecution is part of the cover-up in this case. And from what little I've witnessed from Hank Brennan, he is of the similar vein as Adam Lally. They recruited Hank Brennan for a reason, and it's clear to me what that reason is. So, again, you are warned. You have been warned. I get triggered if I start yelling. Feel free to exit the video.
Good afternoon, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon.
My name's Hank Brennan. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting before.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brennan.
I'm going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you. You shared with us that you have an extensive history of experience in the emergency room.
Yes.
And in the emergency room, you see all types of injuries, don't you?
Yes.
You see physical injuries, yes?
Yes.
Emotional injuries,
Yes.
people who overdose, perhaps they're drunk on drugs,
Yes.
alcohol.
Yes.
So you cover a wide array of different types of treatments.
Yes.
Now, you must have seen a number of broken bones when you were in the emergency room caring for different patients, correct?
Thousands.
Arms, legs, toes.
Yes.
In light of your extensive experience in the emergency room, and looking at all of these broken bones, that doesn't make you an expert in orthopedics, does it?
Emergency orthopedics, yes.
Oh. Have you ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No, I've
Isn't
never.
orthopedics a specialty in medicine where there is specific training?
Yes.
And people who become orthopedics or orthopedic surgeons, they go through rigorous education specifically to be an orthopedic, right?
Well, orthopedics involves more than just setting fractures or diagnosing fractures. Orthopedics involves things like bone tumors, bone cancer.
Already, Hank Brennan is punching. He came punching. He's cutting her off, and you can see by the way he's looking at her and blinking his eyes and looking down. Dr. Marie Russell does not have Hank Brennan's full attention. He is occupied getting ready for the next question he's going to ask her. It's so obvious to me. He has a plan, a strategy right now, and he's more focused on his strategy than her answers. It's already so contrasted by how attorney Robert Alessi was with Dr. Russell. Dr. Russell and Robert Alessi were having a respectful conversation. Robert Alessi allowed her to answer the questions patiently it was a slow process. If you remember, it was even tedious a bit at times, and again redundant to some people. But already Hank Brennan is quick. He's asking her question after question back to back, and he's hardly waiting for her to answer.
There's a lot of other parts of orthopedics, not just trauma. I am an expert in emergency orthopedics, I believe.
So you have decided that you are an expert in orthopedics?
Emergency orthopedics.
Emergency orthopedics, is that a specialty that you get a fellowship in, or somehow you are deemed an expert in any way?
It's not a specialty that has a fellowship that I'm aware of.
I see. So you are proclaiming that you yourself think that you're an emergency room orthopedic?
I have expertise in emergency orthopedics, yes.
Are you an expert in orthopedics?
The whole field of orthopedics, no.
And you don't have any specialized degrees in orthopedics, do you?
No.
You would agree that somebody who's gone through the rigorous requirements of being an orthopedic and qualified, they'd have much more experience than that than you. True?
In general orthopedics, yes. I have a lot of experience in orthopedic trauma related to emergencies.
Have you ever been in any court where you've ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
It was never an issue.
But I'm asking you, have you ever been in any court, state, federal, this country, any other country, where you've been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Has anybody other than yourself ordained you?
Dr. Marie Russell smirked just then, and I think she can also tell that Hank Brennan is not Robert Alessi. Hank Brennan is keeping Dr. Russell on her toes.
As an expert in orthopedics?
I haven't ordained myself as an expert in orthopedics. I have a lot of knowledge and expertise in emergency orthopedics.
Has any authority ever recognized you and qualified you as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Just you.
I haven't declared myself an expert in orthopedics. I have expertise.
You've seen a lot of car accidents you shared with us.
Yes.
As a police officer.
Yes.
In the emergency room.
Yes.
Perhaps when you were at the ME's office, you saw the consequence of car accidents.
I did, yes.
Are you an expert in accident reconstruction?
Reconstruction? No.
And when you see the different people that come in with overdoses, whether it's alcohol or drugs, you treat them, don't you?
Yes.
But you're not an expert toxicologist, are you?
I'm not a toxicologist, no. But toxicology is a part of emergency medicine, so we have training in orthopedic in toxicology. But no, I am not an expert in toxicology.
I'm not suggesting you're unfamiliar with it or you haven't had experience or some training. I'm asking you if you think you're an expert.
In toxicology?
Yes.
No.
And you've shared with us that you agree you don't have any expertise in DNA.
That's correct.
In fact, you know very little about DNA, don't you?
I would say that's pretty reasonable, yes.
That's what you said.
Yes.
Oh. You mentioned that you are generalizing or approximating the number of dog bite cases you've attended to in the emergency room relative to civilian dogs or domestic dogs. Is that right?
Yes.
And you've suggested that you probably treated about one dog a week over a period of 27 years. Yes?
Yes.
Which is 1,000 weeks in your estimation.
Yes.
You worked for some of the most busiest ERs. Was there a lot of patients every day that you treated?
Yes.
On average, how many patients would you treat in the ER over those 27 years on a daily basis?
Daily, I would think about 30.
So if you're treating 30 patients a day over a course of a week, and you consider that in the context of 1,000 weeks, the amount of dog bite cases that you treated in the ER is about half of 1%. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
No, you lost me on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, if you had one dog bite case a week, let's say you had 20 cases a day, 100 a week, that would be 1% of your cases.
Oh, it could, yes, yes, but it's the number of cases, not the percentage that was asked of me.
I'm just asking you a question.
Okay. I just want to clarify that.
And so,
Props to Dr. Russell. Good response.
said how many? 25, 30 a day?
Patients, yes.
So that's less than 1% of the cases that you treated in the ER.
It's like, guys, I get what Hank Brennan is doing. He's like suggesting that well, only a small fraction of your experience is with dog bites, isn't it? Of all the patients you had over the decades, dog bite wounds and dog bite injuries were a very small percentage, a negligible percentage, wasn't it? Like, he's trying to say, like, because a majority of her patients weren't dog bite patients, she doesn't have enough experience. That's where he's going with this. But I just want to say, like, what world is he living in? You know, as if like there's this one hospital in the US where everybody goes with dog bite wounds, right? Like, what are the chances? How common are dog bite wounds in the US? You know, and is Dr. Marie Russell supposed to be like at all the hospitals treating just dog bite wounds? Like, does your local hospital call in a dog bite expert to come to the hospital to treat a dog bite wound? Like, no, like, come on, guys. Like, of all the accidents, more than likely, car accidents are far more common than dog bites, right? Dog bite injuries, right? It's like, what is Hank Brennan getting at, really? Like, he's being difficult, but he's being a prosecutor. And again, he's doing it, in my opinion, rather rudely. He's a bit impatient for Dr. Russell.
Relative to dog bites.
Okay, that's reasonable, and that's average, actually.
Now, when you treated cases of dog bites in the ER, you said that you would sometimes have the reporter, the person injured or somebody with them, tell you it was a dog bite.
Yes.
Yes? And sometimes you had communication difficulties, or there was a reason why they couldn't share it with you.
Yes.
And then you suggested that's how you came to this pattern recognition skill, is that you would have to determine the injury with no help from the reporter.
I was always interested in dog bites, and yes, there were a few occasions when I had to use those skills in order to determine what kind of an animal it was.
Let's talk about those few occasions. Why don't you share with us a story where you met a patient, if you can recall, where you had no idea what the injury may have been because there was no ability to communicate, and tell us about how you determined it was a dog bite.
Well, thinking about a specific case, I can think of cases where I determined it wasn't a dog bite, and it was something else based on the pattern of the bite. And am I not answering your question?
I'm not looking for cases where you couldn't determine if a dog bite. I want you to share some of this wealth of experience you had in dog bites. And share with us, if you will, one of the cases where there was no information that it was a dog bite, for whatever reason, and then you, based on your pattern recognition skills, determined that it was a dog bite. I want you to walk through an actual case that you can recall that you had with this scenario you presented.
That's actually a really good question coming from Hank Brennan. He's asking her, give me an example of a time that there was no mention of a dog bite, but you determined that there was dog bite evidence on a body without anybody telling you that, in fact, a dog attack occurred. That's essentially what Hank Brennan is asking Dr. Russell. And it's an excellent question because that's exactly what happened in this case. Nobody at 34 Fairview mentioned that John O'Keefe was attacked by a dog, even though he clearly was. And nobody on the prosecution, nobody in Norfolk County in the prosecution, the DA's office, nobody mentioned Chloe attacking John O'Keefe shortly before he died. Not even the prosecution, right? The prosecution didn't look into it. The prosecution believed what Brian Albert said at face value, what the Alberts said at face value, even though there are wounds on John O'Keefe's body that don't match up with having been in a car accident, right? It's like, it's an excellent question. But at the same time, if the prosecution was truly in pursuit of the truth, they would not be asking Dr. Russell these questions. If they were truly in pursuit of the truth, they would want to pursue their own dog bite expert. They might want to look for someone they deem more qualified than Dr. Russell, right? It seems like Hank Brennan is not impressed by her. It seems like the prosecution doesn't think she's an expert. Again, they are the ones who requested this Daubert hearing. The prosecution are the ones who do not want Dr. Russell to testify at the retrial, the potential retrial. So I'm saying, like, if the prosecution is not impressed by Dr. Russell's qualifications as a dog bite expert, why don't they seek out their own dog bite expert? Because everybody knows John O'Keefe was attacked by a dog, and everybody knows that dog was Chloe.
I can't give you a specific case because, again, in the overall scheme of emergency medicine and the frequency that dog bites are to other cases, it's just not a case that I would remember, that kind of the specifics of the case.
Interesting. In supporting your vast experience, you shared with us the size of these past experiences and presenting yourself as an expert in pattern recognition. And it's interesting that when I'm asking for the details that support this general rule,
Objection, Your Honor. Argument.
Yeah, so, counsel,
Yeah.
that's okay. In Massachusetts, typically we don't give the reason for objections from the floor. Your objection sustained. No commentary, Mr. Brennan.
you shared with the court that you wrote a few articles that had to do with dog bites.
Co-authored, yes.
Can I ask you some questions about those?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So that right there validates what I was saying earlier. The defense objected to Hank Brennan coming off as argumentative, and Judge Bev agreed with the defense, guys. She actually agreed with the defense, and she sustained an objection from the defense. Eureka.
Now, the first one I want to talk about is law enforcement canine dog bites. Do you remember that article?
Yes.
And that had to do with what you refer to as law enforcement dogs or canines.
Yes.
In that article, you talk specifically about a technique that you believe law enforcement or canine dogs utilize, which is bite and hold.
Yes.
And what you have suggested is that the bite and hold technique is different than typically a domestic dog or a civilian dog.
Yes.
Because it's a trained learning for the dog, correct?
Yes.
There are certain injuries you would expect from a canine dog using a bite and hold technique.
Yes.
When you wrote this or co-authored this article, you didn't actually sit down with people who had wounds and compare the wounds to the dog that caused them, did you?
To the actual dog?
Yes.
I didn't, but I didn't.
Just want to know if you did.
No.
Okay. And when you looked at these different cases, there was 700 cases. This was what you called the authors called a retrospective analysis.
Correct.
That means you were looking back at old files.
Yes, but I participated in some of those files. We were just looking back at the data from those files.
Mm-hmm.
I participated in the care of some of those patients.
I understand.
Okay.
And so when you went through the files, you didn't have the opportunity then to follow up and speak to any of the participants or the injured victims, did you?
I spoke to many of the victims while I was treating them.
When you decided to write this article, did you go back and speak to anybody?
No.
There's no mention in this article about pattern recognition in any way. That's not what this article was about, was it?
No, that's not what the article's about.
It's about something entirely different than what you've suggested today as your pattern recognition skills. Yes?
That's correct. I recognized the patterns because I saw the wounds and I saw the injuries and I saw them over and over and over again. And I recognized those patterns throughout my career. And so it's hard to unrecognize something.
I'm trying to ask you about the significance of your study because this is actually something that you published.
Yes.
And I'm trying to determine, or I want you to be able to discuss the relevancy of this article to what you're testifying today. So the really narrow question I have for you is, in this study, it had nothing to do with trying to engage in pattern recognition.
The purpose of the study was not to teach people pattern recognition. It was to alert them to the dangers of this different type of dog bite so that they weren't undertreating them. But in the process of seeing all those patients, I developed the pattern recognition.
Okay. And so there was another article, Managing Law Enforcement Canine Dog Bites in the Emergency Department.
Yes.
Now that only comprised of 4 cases, yes?
It was a case description.
Of 4 cases?
Yes.
And you know, most studies usually include over 30 cases?
It's not a study.
I see. You reviewed types of injuries relative to civilian or domestic dogs, or just canine?
Those were canine dogs.
And again, your position is that the injuries by canine dogs, law enforcement dogs, are different in kind than domestic or civilian dogs.
In general, when they bite and hold, those injuries are different. Sometimes they don't get a complete bite.
And so this article didn't deal with civilian or domestic dogs. It dealt with only canine dogs.
That's correct.
Exclusively on the idea or the perspective of bite and hold injuries.
It was on the perspective of you need to learn how to treat these.
Bite and hold injuries.
These dog bite injuries.
Bite and hold.
Yes.
Okay. Now, again, in this article, there was no effort to identify wounds or use pattern analysis. It was the treatment of bite and hold injuries from canines.
That's correct.
Law enforcement canines. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also shared with us, in addition to these 2 articles on law enforcement dogs and bite and hold injuries, that you did some revising, editing of a book for a Dr. Is it Vati?
I'm sorry, say again?
You said that you revised or edited a book of a
Dr.
friend.
Vale.
Dr. Vale. I'm sorry, Dr. Vale. And when you were asked about what actually you recall about the topics, you don't really remember the topics of that book. You just remembered you edited it?
No, I remember the topics of the book.
In the topics of the book, it was dealing with human teeth, wasn't it?
Yes, but in the article itself, if you read it, there's mention about dog dentition.
There's a mention of it.
Yes.
Tell us what that mention was.
Well, the mention is that the dog dentition looks different and dog bites look different because of the triangular shape of the dog's mouth versus a rounded shape of the human's mouth.
Well, when they talk about the shape of a dog's mouth, it's not really triangular. It's like an hourglass.
Well, but that was the quote. Those were the words that were used in the article, and it's relative triangular shape. It's as opposed to a round shape of a human.
Well, in most studies, professional studies by experts, isn't it routinely referred to as an hourglass shape?
I haven't seen that at all.
Well, have you read books on dog bites?
I've read articles on dog bites.
You've read books on dog bites?
No, I have read articles on dog bites.
Have you ever read this book? Do you recognize this as an authority?
No.
So for the record, you need to say what you just showed the witness.
Showing Dr. Russell a book called Dog Bites, a Multidisciplinary Perspective, edited by Daniel S. Mills.
Is that it? I'm sorry, may I see it?
If the court would let me, of course. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. doesn't mention if any of these people have degrees of
I'm
any.
sorry, Your Honor, I don't believe a question's pending.
Sorry.
Oh, great. she's awesome. You know, guys, let's not forget that Dr. Marie Russell grew up in Massachusetts, right? She was a Boston PD. You know, she this ain't her first rodeo.
Mr. Alessi, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you. I don't believe a question
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
pending for the witness.
Okay, are you moving to strike that?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll strike that. So, Doctor, I know it's been a long day. Wait for a question, please, okay?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
You done reviewing the vote?
But I totally get it. It's that prosecutor, Hank Brennan, is grilling Dr. Russell, and he's impatient with her. He's nowhere near as reserved and contained as Robert Alessi, you'll notice. And I can tell that Dr. Russell doesn't like it. She knows that Hank Brennan is trying to discredit her, and she's not just gonna sit there and take it. She's had several rebuttals that Hank Brennan doesn't like.
You've, through your testimony, attempted to or suggested there's a distinction between canine law enforcement wounds and that of domestic.
Yes,
But domestic dogs can cut the skin,
correct.
cause serious injury,
Yes,
deep wounds.
they can.
It's not just that domestic dogs just nip around the corners. They can bite.
They can.
They can attack.
Yes,
They can kill.
yes,
You've seen it firsthand.
yes. No, I didn't witness the attack, no.
Do you doubt that it was a canine attack?
No, I didn't witness the attack myself.
I understand.
Firsthand is what you said.
Okay. You made a firsthand observation of a dog bite in the 1970s when you were at a training,
Yes,
and one of the participants was bit.
yes.
Now, you said you didn't remember the wound. Do you have any memory of looking at what happened after a dog actually bit somebody firsthand?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'm going to allow its cross-examination on our test, based on our testimony.
Say again? Any question?
Should I repeat, Doctor?
Yes, please.
Do you have any memory of what you saw of when a dog actually bit somebody, your firsthand observation?
From 50 years ago, no.
Right. When people came in the emergency room, you didn't actually see the bites or how the mechanics of it happening. You're treating it after they come and ask you for aid.
That's correct.
Did you ever, in any of those emergency room experiences, go and see the dog?
No,
Did you ever have any other information about the dog, photographs, pictures, anything like that?
well, I did have other information about the dog.
Give me an example. Tell me.
Well, we had to fill out a dog bite report after a dog bite's requirement in Los Angeles County. So, although most doctors don't have the time to do it, I tried to comply with that rule. So I would question the victim, try to find out the address of the dog if they knew it. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But I tried to get as much information as I could.
Did you ever get any photographs?
No.
From it? So it was just reporter information from the person who's coming for treatment or somebody that was assisting them?
Yes.
Okay. You provided a CV in this case, didn't you?
Yes.
In your CV, you list out some of your pertinent history and experience.
Yes.
Subsequent to your CV, you wrote a report and you signed it on the 9th of December, 2024.
Yes.
And it was provided to the Commonwealth, on December 10th, 2024, 2 days ago.
Yes.
There are a number of things that you offered in that report regarding your suggested experience that are just not in your CV. Isn't that fair to say?
That could be, yes. Of course, you can't put everything in the CV.
Well, you didn't say anything really about dog bite experience in your CV other than your 2 articles, did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And you didn't mention anything about this specialized training or expertise in pattern recognition analysis. You didn't mention anything about that in your CV, did you?
Can't mention everything.
I didn't ask if you could mention anything. I'm asking if you mentioned that.
Well, it says brief CB on the top.
Okay. I'll ask you again.
Okay.
Did you mention anything in your CV about pattern recognition analysis in your described expertise in them?
No.
In your report, and let me ask you before we get to your report, you testified at a voir dire in this case
Yes,
about a year ago,
less than that.
and you then testified at trial.
Yes.
When you testified in the voir dire and trial, and in your CV, you don't mention the scores of peer review articles on dog bites that you studied, do you?
Ask that question.
I'm sorry. When you testified 2 times before,
Yes.
did you talk about the scores, as you describe it, of peer review articles that you've studied on dog bites?
On the numbers of period. No, I didn't mention that. That's correct.
Okay, and that's not mentioned in your CV either.
You don't usually mention it in your CV about the articles you read.
But I'm asking if you did.
Oh, no, I wouldn't mention that in my
Okay,
CV.
so let's talk about it now since you didn't mention it. You read scores of peer-reviewed articles on dog bites.
Throughout my career, yes.
Let's talk about the peer-reviewed articles that you've studied on pattern recognition analysis of dog bites. Could you please give me a list of those peer-reviewed articles that you studied?
I don't think there are any.
Well, you
There
said-
are some mentions of pattern recognition in some articles. However, I don't think there's a dedicated article on pattern recognition of
Well,
dog bites.
you said in your report that you reviewed scores of peer-reviewed articles on dog bites.
Dog bites, yes.
Okay, so those didn't really include pattern recognition as you've described your expertise today.
Some of them did, some of them didn't, but that might have not have been the major focus of the article.
Which ones did? Can you reference us the ones that you've read and relied upon, in your opinion today, that have to do with pattern recognition analysis?
May I look at my report or my CV?
Sure.
Of course.
Sure. Go ahead and take your time, Dawn.
Thank you. Okay, there is, and they might not have used the term.
It's something to witness Judge Bev tell Dr. Russell to take her time. It's as if Judge Bev herself also notices how much Hank Brennan is rushing through these questions. And again, it's back to back. He's not even letting Dr. Russell breathe between questions.
Pattern recognition, but that's what they're talking about in these articles.
Okay.
There is a article by D. Muniak. It's actually listed in my report under literature.
Okay, I see it.
It's the third one. Yes.
And that deals with pattern recognition analysis?
It's part of the article. There was a lot more in the article than just pattern recognition. And again, they might not have used that specific term pattern, but it's what the subject was discussed in the middle of the article, yes.
What was discussed in this article that you relied upon?
Oh, I relied on the descriptions of wounds. I relied on a lot of this article.
Well, share with us in detail. Could you tell us what you relied on in that article as part of your opinion?
There was a description. There was an area that described wounds and fatal wounds in dog bites, and how to approach them. You know, how to investigate them. There was an area that described what some of these wounds looked like. And there was actually an area that I believe it was this article that said that if you have this plus this plus this, that it is pathognomonic for a dog bite. Now, I believe that was the article that said that. One of these articles did. But anyways, so yeah. So I think maybe you might want to look at them.
Oh, I did.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking you.
Okay.
That's why I'm confused about which one you're talking about.
There was not a recipe book that said, okay, you know, this is the pattern of a dog bite. It might not get a lot of readers for that, but this was a forensic approach as to how to identify fatal dog attacks.
So from your resume, Doctor, could you tell me which article you're talking about?
I'm talking about the third one down.
What's the title?
The title of the article is Forensic Approach of Fatal Dog Attacks, a Case Report and Literature Review.
Okay.
Fatal dog attacks oftentimes involve vulnerable areas like the neck,
Absolutely.
abdomen.
Neck, face.
So he's moving on to other questions, meaning Dr. Russell answered his question, the previous question, and she did rely on peer-reviewed articles pertaining to dog bite investigations. So it's, again, Hank Brennan is trying to suggest and imply that she doesn't really know as much as she claims, or as the defense team claims that she does. But again, she read everything, and I don't know. It's like because she answered the question, Hank Brennan, and Hank Brennan's just going to move on right away. Like, I'm saying, he worked rather hard the last few minutes to almost disprove something about her studies. And when we finally got the answer from her that I think Hank Brennan was suggesting she didn't do, but she did, he immediately moves on to another question pertaining to neck injuries. You know, he's not stopping, he's not pausing. And I think she gave him an answer that he didn't think she was going to give him. And so he's swift. It's anyway, he's he's behaving like a prosecutor, but like not a good one.
Head, yes. Sometimes the abdomen, yes.
Okay. No cases cited in there that deal with wounds on an arm.
Because it's a fatal.
Right.
Right. But that doesn't mean that there weren't wounds on the arm. It's that the fatal wounds, like in the case I autopsied, the fatal wounds generally were in the areas that had organs that could be damaged, like or major vessels like a carotid artery, neck. But there could be a lot of other wounds. For instance, my case, there was probably about 60 wounds.
I understand.
Okay, but some of, you're not going to talk about every single one of them because they're not worthy of describing.
Okay. You said that you attended multiple seminars, talks, and lectures regarding wound identification.
Yes.
Okay. When did you attend seminars on wound identification?
Intermittently throughout my career. I can't give you any dates.
Okay. Were any of those wound identifications dog bite wound identification seminars?
No, they were general wound identifications, and they may mention bites.
Was there any of these seminars that focused on dog bite wounds?
That focused on dog bite wounds?
Yes.
No.
How about the talks you went to? Any of the talks focus on dog bite wounds?
There were several talks that focused on bite wounds.
I'm going to ask again. Were there any talks that focused on dog bite wounds?
No.
Lectures. You cited that you've attended lectures as part of this experience. Can you recall specific lectures that focused on dog bite wounds?
Not entire lectures. There were lectures in emergency department, training sessions, but dog bites were usually mixed in with other kind of animal bites, and discussion would occur because it's not you have to use up an hour usually when you go to one of these lectures, and there were other animals to talk about besides dogs.
In these lectures that you went to that didn't focus primarily on dog bite wounds, did they talk about pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds?
Generally not the emergency medicine ones, because that's actually not really a major focus. The focus in emergency medicine is treatment. I'm a bit unusual because I have this interest that I've had for many years.
So it's fair to say none of the multiple seminars, talks, lectures that you attended had any focus on pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds?
None of them had any focus. That's correct.
You've shared with us your experience. You've agreed that you are not an accident reconstruction expert, correct?
Correct.
Are you an expert on self-defense?
No.
So when you give opinions about self-defense, I know you have experience and you have observations of what you believe a defense is, but do you have any actual experience as a self-defense expert?
No.
Do you have any specialized training, certificates, degrees in self-defense?
No.
Defense wounds?
No.
When you went to these lectures, talks, seminars, group meetings, do you have any memory of particular trainings that you had on self-defense wounds?
You mean defense wounds?
Sure, defense wounds.
Yes, I do. I have particular memories of those types of lectures.
Okay.
And topic. Oh, yes, I do.
Well, let's talk about a few of them. What was one of the lectures that you went to that was directed at defense wounds?
Well, not only did I go to some of these lectures, but I gave some of these lectures.
Okay.
And they were child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence lectures. And in the coroner's office, again, mechanism of injury is stressed. And there's a whole training program.
You have no degree in biomechanics.
No.
Okay. And so when I asked you about one of the trainings on defense wounds, I want you to just give us a little.
Dr. Russell, does not have a degree in biomechanics, but the ARCA guys do. And the ARCA guys told us that John O'Keefe was not hit by an SUV.
Detail from your memory about the training. Share with us how you've come to this knowledge on defense wounds.
Again, okay. So in the clinical setting, I was taught many times, and then I subsequently taught students about how victims of a violent act will instinctively bring up their arms to protect themselves from whatever is being inflicted, whether it be knife wounds or blunt wounds from an object, whatever is being inflicted on them. They will tend, without thinking, to try to protect themselves. And I also think it's common sense, by the way.
So on the outside of the arm, if there's marks, that could be a defensive wound?
Yes.
Could it be a different type of wound? Not a defensive wound, but a wound where somebody punches or hits and it hits a metal or a stationary or a fixed object?
Could those kind of wounds end up there? Oh, yes.
Okay. So just because there is a wound on the posterior side of a forearm, that does not make it a defensive wound, does it?
Not absolutely.
Well,
in context, though.
Right. So you need to know more information.
Correct.
So perhaps if you saw how that happened, that would provide you more information.
That would be one way.
But if you saw nothing and have really no idea how it happened, it doesn't give you a lot of context of the wound other than it's a wound on the posterior side of an arm.
Well, it does in the sense that it's a common way that people protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. Can someone incur wounds to the forearm, posterior side of the forearm, if they fall to the ground and fall backwards?
They could, but they wouldn't look like that.
Oh.
That series. Okay.
Excellent. And, I feel bad because Hank Brennan worded these questions strategically so that Dr. Russell was answering no to multiple questions. And some of those questions, if Judge Bev, again, has her way, some of those questions kind of weigh heavy on the credentials here. I'm just saying Hank Brennan was trying to discredit Dr. Russell, and because he asked her multiple questions in which she answered no, it's counting against her. And I could see that counting against her because Judge Bev, Judge Bev approved the motion to have the Daubert hearing in the first place. Judge Beverly Cannoni was also not convinced that Dr. Russell was a dog bite expert. Again, Dr. Bev, Judge Bev is on the side of the prosecution. Judge Bev has been on the side of the prosecution since the first trial, and she's not wavered her position in any way. But anyway, I will make a part 7. Thank you for watching.